Join me as we talk about the hottest and driest biome on the earth, the desert, a presentation by McKenna Hawks, Lucy Taylor, and Marley Messer. We've all heard of it, the desert. But what is a desert? A desert is classically defined as an area of land which receives 10 or less inches of rain per given year. These dry and arid areas make up 25% of the Earth's landmass and are home to a number of uniquely adapted species. Due to the extreme environment, the species which occupy the area have a number of adaptations that make them able to survive the extreme heat, cold, and lack of water. Due to the little water, vegetation is less common in this biome, yet plants such as cacti and brittlebrush have adapted to a low water diet in order to survive the biome. Animals such as rattlesnakes and grasshoppers have also adapted to be able to survive in this arid environment. Here we have an example of a desert food web, which contains a number of primary, secondary, and tertiary consumers. Some plants which habitat the desert are cacti, brittlebrush, fluffgrass, and velvet mesquite. These serve as food sources to lower-level consumers such as the grasshopper, red harvest fire ant, and antelope squirrel. These consumers then become the prey of larger consumers such as rattlesnakes and collared lizards, who ultimately can fall prey to top predators such as the red-tailed hawk or desert fox. There are 5 main different relationships between organisms in their ecosystems. The first, competition. Competition is the harmful interaction between the same or different species of a limited supply of resources that both the organisms need in order to survive. Due to this competition, certain organisms are constantly interfering with one another. In the desert biome specifically, such organisms as the desert coyote and sidewinder rattlesnake are in a competitive relationship over similar foods, such as mice and rabbits. This causes the two to compete and struggle for the same prey. Predation is the relationship between 2 unrelated species, where one acts as the predator, by capturing and feeding on the other organism that serves as the prey. In a relationship such as this, normally the prey outnumber the predator. In the desert, the hawk is a massive predator towards the smaller animals, such as mice or even the antelope squirrel. It hunts down its prey and quickly snatches it up for feeding. Due to this relationship, we can ensure that population size stays stable. Parasitism. Parasitism is a relationship in which one organism benefits and the other is harmed. A parasite gains nutrition from its host and can obtain shelter and even a habitat on the host, where they can further reproduce and survive. An example in the desert biome would be the desert coyote and the desert sand flea. The desert sand flea attaches itself onto the coyote and gains nutrition from the coyote's blood. It is also able to reproduce and create a habitat on the coyote's fur. Mutualism is defined as the relationship between 2 organisms in which both of the organisms benefit from a certain activity being done. The 2 species may trade resources, services, or protection from predators in this mutualistic relationship. An example of such relationship in the desert is the Gila woodpecker and the prickly pear cactus. The woodpecker is able to feed on the fruit and supplies the prickly pear cactus as a source of energy. By doing this, the woodpecker can disperse the cactus's seeds, further benefiting both organisms in the relationship, seeing as the cactus can continue to be populated in the desert and the woodpecker is gaining food. Commensalism is the relationship between 2 individual species in which one species benefits from the other and the other species is neither harmed nor benefited. One example in the desert is the relationship between the hawk and the saguaro cactus. The hawk can build their nests on the saguaro cactus. However, this action neither benefits or harms the cactus, but it's beneficial to the hawk because it provides a habitat and protection for the animal. There are 3 main patterns of dispersion. The first is the clump dispersion, which can be found in the desert with the prickly pear cactus. Clump dispersion is defined as when individuals in a population are clustered together, creating some patches with many individuals and some patches with none at all. Clump dispersion is the most common form of dispersion, as most animals group together around their resources, or in herds. This plant demonstrates clump dispersion by forming large populations where resources are abundant and small populations when resources are scarce. These plants are able to form extremely large populations that take over 25% of the land's vegetation if a clumped group is formed. The second pattern of dispersion is the uniform dispersion. In the desert, this can be seen through the rattlesnake. Uniform dispersion is defined as a population where individuals are spaced evenly throughout an area. Rattlesnakes demonstrate this form of dispersion because they are found and spaced out through the desert in order to avoid an overlap in resources. This species does not occupy its habitat in groups and tends to avoid other rattlesnakes, which leads to them being spread out throughout the biome. In order to avoid competition for food and other resources, the species spreads itself out and increases the odds of survival by carrying out uniform dispersion. Finally, the last form of dispersion is random dispersion, and one example in this is the bobcat in the desert biome. So random dispersion is defined as a population in which individuals are arranged without any apparent pattern. Random dispersion is the least common dispersion pattern, as animals usually clump together around abundant resources or each other in herds, or they even choose to evenly space themselves throughout a biome. So for this reason, random dispersion is very uncommon. But the bobcat demonstrates random dispersion around the time of its mating season. When going out to look for a mate, bobcats go to a number of random places that do not form any pattern at all. During this mating season, most animals have a predictable pattern, while the bobcat has no pattern at all, showing that it is actually, in fact, randomly dispersed. A survivorship curve is a graphic representation of the number of individuals in a population that can be expected to survive to any specific age. There are three main types of curves: 1, 2, and 3. One example in the desert biome is the roadrunner, which typically shows a type 2 curve. The roadrunner has a relatively constant mortality, and the birth and death rates are not dramatic at either end of the roadrunner's life. Therefore, it shows a constant decrease in the amount of individuals in the population. In contrast, humans, for example, are a type 3 curve, where more at a certain point in the lifespan, they rapidly decrease, and a type 1 is when immediately the death rate increases after birth. But because it is a constant mortality rate, the roadrunner shows a typical type 2 curve. The desert has mostly classic biogeochemical cycles, starting with the water cycle. However, in this biome, the water cycle is a little bit different because of the lack of such water. Typically, the water cycle starts with precipitation, then runoff, and then we have groundwater, which then evaporates, condensates, and rains again. So this continuous flow of water is what continues to make sure that there is enough water in a certain biome. However, because as we spoke about earlier, there's a bunch of adapted species within the desert, they are used to not having enough water. In the desert, since there is not active or accessible groundwater, there is not enough water to evaporate, condensate, or rain, so it's a halted cycle. But it is mostly normal, but it is currently happening in the desert, but it is just lessened. The nitrogen cycle happens all the time, and it works when animals consume the nitrates in the soil. So we go through the entire food web, starting with the first level consumers and such, who take the nitrates from the soil and their immediate food sources, eat it, and then when they die, the decomposers break down their bodies, and their bodies are reintegrated back into the soil. Then starts the process over again, so it's continuously working and it's continuously occurring. The same goes for the carbon cycle. As plants absorb carbon dioxide, then the primary consumers eat them, secondary and then tertiary. Those tertiary consumers die, the decomposers break down their bodies, and then again the carbon is reintegrated into the soil. But with the carbon cycle, it is also in the air. So we have this carbon cycle happening all the time. So with these biogeochemical processes, they're always occurring, but like the water cycle, sometimes it is halted. As we all know, humans disturb the environment more than we are proud of, especially in the desert biome. So what happens in the desert biome is, due to the fact that oil is so rich in the deserts, especially the Arabian deserts, humans have had a very large impact with their fossil fuel drilling and their harvesting. So this is notable when we have the big machinery going into the environments. How this affects the environments, the animals, and the plants is that either A, the humans are disturbing the dispersion of animals so that they are completely moving species out of their homes, or they are polluting the water and food sources with the fossil fuels that are being drilled, or the excess pollutants off of the machinery. And by doing this, we're killing excess amount of animals due to the fact that we're polluting their water and their food, killing them, giving them diseases, etc. So it pollutes the air, which can also cause acid rain. And therefore, so when the water cycle does occur, it is not healthy water that is being put in the ground or given to these animals and plants. It is actually acid rain. And this is how the humans have completely disturbed the desert biome. Thanks for learning about the desert biome with us. Hope you enjoyed the video.